Why do we feel the compulsion to be right?
What does it mean when even experts can be wrong?
Is kitchen sink microscopy the path to the truth or the journey beside it?
Well, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and it'd be nice to you like and share and subscribe to the channel. You're probably already subscribed though if you're seeing this, so thanks for that. Yeah.
That would be the logical conclusion. I am Casey Rochford, the smarter of us, and we also write music. So you should check that out at the end. Otherwise, you're not very smart. Take it from a smart guy. So, dumb guy, what are we talking about today?
No, you got it wrong. It's idiot. uh, well, I think we could kind of talk about something that's sort of very relevant to the show, and that is how to argue.
Yep.
Yeah. This is a pretty big topic, actually. And there have been many times throughout the history of this channel when we've gotten a little heated in our discussion. But I hope people noticed that never did it devolve into ad hominem. Like we stayed on like pretty close to topic, even though like maybe we're getting a little frustrated, and then, cooled off after that and just carried on with the conversation.
Yeah.
Never yell at each other. That's like never happened. And I think it's because we're both pretty competent arguers, I guess.
Right. That does like speak loud volumes to why being versed in the art of argument makes life easier. Because if you are having a discussion with somebody just as well versed in that as you, it can almost never get out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, like to some extent, it takes like years of practice and checking yourself on a lot of the parts where we're all weak on one logical fallacy or another.
Yeah,
and that's basically what it comes down to, right? Is like logic is the foundation of argument.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Well, and that's that. You are absolutely correct in that, because most people, when they hear argument or an argue, to argue, they think of shouting and yelling and name calling and stuff like that, because that's what happens for a lot of people who aren't practiced in the art or craft of arguing. Things take an emotional turn almost always, rather than a logical one. And if your focus is always on the logical side, well, then it's very rare. Like you might feel emotion, right, get a little frustrated or a little angry, but it doesn't necessarily impact the course of the discussion.
Yeah. The lesser the other side is employing logic, the easier it is to become frustrated. But so I mean, it's not like it's impervious to frustration or emotion, but to be aware of what makes like a solid foundation for backing your claim, let's say, it is all based in logic. And
it is, yeah. Well,
and logic has subjectivity too.
It can. It tries not to. I mean, it's like science. There's always a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, it's more of a thinking about thinking than like a hard science sort of thing. But
Yeah.
it's like ultimately, if you do that enough, and you place yourself in situations where arguments do occur, um, you'll eventually kind of arrive at somewhere near the truth, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think what you were saying earlier, like how even if you yourself are a logical person when it comes to an argument, um, that you can still get frustrated and feel emotion and stuff. I think those things get more. Those things are brought out because the other side, like the other person or parties that you are having this argument or discussion with, if they don't have that skill themselves and are resorting to lots of fallacious arguments and things
Yeah.
like that, then it can be incredibly frustrating because it's like you can tell them that, but they're just going to ignore that because they're set in their ways in a sense in their methodology of arguing.
Yeah.
Well, like Etienne, right? You know.
Yeah, it's a shame we can't link to that episode because YouTube pulled it.
Yep.
But yeah, like we had interviewed in our first season an anti-vaxxer who was, now this is another good point we should talk about. He was very skilled in arguing, but he did not exercise logic quite enough. Let's say.
It's almost like he weaponized the skills of art.
Yeah. So like that's the other component. It's not all logic. A lot of it is confidence.
Yeah.
Basically, like asserting yourself as kind of dominant. Like there was a point in the episode where you said, "Did I just win?" Like
Yeah.
like he was really like kind of jazzed up because he thought he had this like gotcha moment, and he thought that being the better person at arguing meant that you're right, and that is not at all correct.
No. Or if the other person is left like unable to answer something, that kind of thing. Well, it's kind of asking that question is like asking who's winning in a game of chess.
Yeah.
You don't win until the end.
Yeah.
Right. There's not like winning. No one's ahead. Like I've been down to like a king and a queen and still checkmated somebody who had way more pieces than me.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that was an interesting episode. But
yeah.
I had something I was going to say about that, and I totally forgot because I started thinking about chess all of a sudden.
Well, maybe the other elements other than logic, like there's definitely like an easy point of frustration when you come across a person like Etienne who has all that confidence, who has that rapid manner of firing off all of these, like bullet points that he's memorized as if they're fact.
Yeah.
And then like the frustration comes when if you have some kind of audience and the topic happens to be something of quite a great importance, such as vaccination, to do it or to not. That confidence. This is kind of a cult of personality effect, right? The phenomenon where like confidence exudes leadership. The sense of, oh, that person must be right because look how sure of themselves they are. Like, why would you be that sure of yourself if you haven't examined your position on that in great detail?
Well, I hate to say this, but that's how all politics works.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, like, you can do a heavy amount of research on something and be totally wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, he was
way off base.
Like he had a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, but it was kind of like this Gish gallop sort of thing. Just like one, you would start to answer, and then he'd boom with another question after that, just cut you off, and then more and more. Like you just can't keep up.
Yeah,
like that was what I noticed, and that is a tactic that people can employ to kind of knock you off of your balance, essentially, so that now you're kind of
I felt really it was like it was kind of a mental parkour. Like I had to bounce off of one wall onto the other with like changing gears on what we were talking about. Like, oh, now we're talking about Mercury, and now autism, and blah blah blah, and how he's drawing these lines between these things. It was all a convoluted mess.
Yeah.
And that really like throws you off.
Well, yeah. How do you can't even really have a reasonable debate or discussion when the focus keeps changing.
Yeah. I mean, like the best tactic I've found to arguing with someone is to shut up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let them do all the talking. Let them gish gallop themselves into a state of stupor, and just absorb everything they're saying, and then just kind of sit there and formulate like, okay, where's this person coming from? Like, take in all these facts and stack them against what you know or what you believe, and try to determine like, what sort of a person are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a person that is this self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing? Like they've got the idea that they want, and they look for the research that supports that, which was kind of like what he was.
That for sure.
And those are kind of the hardest ones to turn.
Well, I've one thing I've found in dealing with people like that, like listening, of course, is letting them talk, but asking questions can be very helpful. If mostly what you say is a question, you can then kind of take control of the situation and maybe mold the answers that come out, and maybe get them to see something that they didn't see about what they're saying.
Yes, the art of asking a question is very important too. Like, the way you ask it, like the way you phrase it, should kind of challenge their thinking a little bit.
Yeah. No,
rather than like asking for some factoid.
Yeah. I would say ask about like either a viewpoint or something like that, or a what if situation, like, well, what in this situation, what about how would that work, or whatever, like that's flat earthers that's another really similar. They're very similar in that regard.
Yeah.
But I think asking a lot of questions is really important, especially when people claim to be an authority about something and you happen to know a lot more than they do. Clearly, you can ask them a question that befuddles them. That like, oh, wait a minute, that kind of thing. And then that kind of takes the wind out of their sails, I guess, in a sense. But that's not to say, because it's not it. The point is essentially finding the truth of the matter, whatever it may be, or getting as close as possible, or coming to some kind of understanding, right? And a shared understanding, and not necessarily to win or to convince somebody of something, because you may not. The thing is, really, a lot of discussions like that, if you're dealing with an anti-vaxxer or a flat earther or a moon landing hoaxer or whatever, it's not to, in the moment, your current discussion, this linear process you're having right now, this day, you got it. By the time you finish, by the time the sun sets, they gotta be convinced. No, what you need to do is plant seeds of doubt or whatever, or questions, or things to ponder that people maybe go, well, I don't know, I'll look into that kind of thing. That's like probably that should be the focus in those cases. Because they're not going to change their mind immediately, or nobody will. And in fact, a lot of people, when you present them with contradictory like evidence, they double down and or just kind of like dismiss something, like the flat earthers, right? You show them, they're like, well, there's never been a picture of Earth, and then you're like, well, there's a freaking satellite up there which you yourself can like go, it's not even NASA, it's like Japan or something, and you can live look at the Earth, and they're like, oh, well, that's CG. Like, okay, well, then what kind
there's
of
always
evidence?
hand waving, there's always like some easy explanation that they use to just wipe it away.
Yeah, it's moving the goalposts is one thing.
And like these are the types of like deficits in logic that tell you exactly like not necessarily whether or not this person is right or wrong, but it tells you a lot about how sure you can be about what they're claiming. If a person has a terrible argument for something, they could be right.
It's true.
You shouldn't forget that. But if the argument is very bad, there's a higher probability that they didn't exercise logic in their research for a very good reason. Because it was probably a cognitive bias at play, where they're trying really hard to find the things that support what they already have decided and ignoring the ones, or conspiracizing them as some sort of like grand lizard people scheme or whatever.
Well, I think this is the thing too. We need to like make this clear that we're all potentially susceptible to that kind of thing. The cherry picking and biased research and things like that, because certain people feel really strongly about what they believe, and self-challenging is sometimes an uncomfortable thing, and so it's much easier to just kind of like push aside anything that contradicts what you believe and hyper focus on the things that support what you believe. The greatest of minds can be guilty of that. It's like it is a human trait. It's not like just flat earthers or anti-vaxxers that they fall into that.
Well, that's another important thing to do is to learn when to be critical and when not to be. Because critical thinking and skepticism ride a very thin fence with conspiratorial thinking and I don't know, just kind of like erring too much on the side of caution, where you become more cynical than skeptical, I guess. And that is so easy to do, because like, how can you tell when the grass is blowing, whether or not it's the wind or a lion? We all like make these judgment calls in the moment, and the path we choose can really set us on the wrong way, which over time gets worse and worse, because you're getting further off path.
Well, did you have more?
No.
Oh, okay. That's a really good point. And that makes me think like, well, you have to constantly check yourself, and me
before you wreck yourself.
Cue the beat. It's so one thing that I do all the time now is argue with myself, and because obviously you would be your greatest adversary, I suppose, in a particular thing. And
how often are you talking to yourself?
I am right now, actually. In my head, I just see myself there on the other side.
Yeah, when you're on Zoom, you're technically not drinking alone.
That's true. Good point. Yeah. Well, it depends on how you define what makes you alone or not alone. I mean, there's billions of people on this planet, so yeah, you're not drinking
Billions
alone.
and billions.
Billions and billions.
Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. Um, it, yeah, it's the thing is like, okay, there are these people like what we're talking about, these kind of higher level, like obvious people, but not everybody is going to be faced with like a anti-vaxxer or a flat earther or whatever. Like sure, it's important to observe certain behaviors when you're arguing with those people, but we argue with regular people who have everyday thoughts and opinions and things, and like it should apply to everybody. It's kind of like the art of negotiation in some ways, that comes into play a lot in day-to-day activities, and having logic and arguing skills, I guess, also applies.
But I wouldn't say that negotiation has really all that much to do with arguing unless you're really just trying to stop talking about it and just deciding to agree to disagree.
Oh, I don't like that term.
Yeah,
I don't like that term at all. But
there's really no reason to negotiate. Like the point of an argument is like you each think you're right, and you each feel you have good reasons to think such a thing, right? And there's no reason to negotiate on that. Like,
no, I'm not necessarily saying like making a like leading to a compromise necessarily, right. But in like the art of negotiation is like how you interact, how you craft what you say, reading body language, like that kind of thing, and how you mold the course of the conversation. That adding that to your toolbox can be extremely helpful.
Yeah,
because that's like when negotiating too. Like, let's say, I don't know, there's a hostage situation, and you're there trying to get the hostages out of there safely. Learning how to deal with that kind of situation and put your emotions aside and work towards the matter at hand, the most important thing.
Yeah,
that is very, very important.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Negotiating is actually pretty powerful now that I think about it. Like, because a lot of negotiation has to do with your demeanor, how calm you are, how worked up you are, like,
or
it shows desperation or confidence, basically.
Or tuning yourself to the other side's frequency, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You do have to do that. It's almost diplomacy is another thing too. Like if you, so one of the, like, because there's kind of also there's almost like a Jedi side of things to like arguing in that, like, you don't want to mold the like the conversation in a way that makes it adversarial. Like, you can diffuse the situation by making it kind of like comfortable or reassuring to the person, like, hey, I'm not judging you, that kind of thing, and get them to calm down a little bit and open up a little bit. And at that point, they might be a little more receptive to listening to what you have to say about it, and let them know that you're receptive to what they have to say and that maybe you understand. Like in that conversation with Etienne, it's like, I was like, hey, I totally get it. Like, I've been there,
Yeah.
I feel differently now, but I do absolutely understand where you're coming from, and that kind of thing. Obviously, I was just on the sidelines for the most part, but doing things like that can completely alter the way an argument plays out.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that, like, things like that, however, effective you might think they would be often really don't uh, land exactly as you would hope.
Mm-hmm.
To try to kind of commiserate with a person, like, I understand. I felt exactly the same way. Then I came upon this knowledge and this knowledge and this knowledge. Like it might work for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to land exactly the same
Well,
in
and
another person's brain.
that's where you kind of have to be able to adapt and change
Yeah,
tactics, because some
which is
people will
really
be
hard. Really, really hard.
it is. Well, and that's because we've touched a lot on the logic side, which is exceedingly important, but you can't be like stoic and logical and like necessarily engage with somebody in a way that they will understand. Sometimes
Yeah,
you need to involve the emotional side, the
that's where the
diplomacy.
art comes in.
Yeah, diplomacy, negotiating skills, things like that. It's a whole umbrella of all these different tools that you can draw upon. And
Yeah,
but the thing is, what that does too, like it helps your everyday life, because we get into conflicts all the time as human beings with each other, and
yeah,
learning how to resolve those conflicts. I mean, sometimes it does come down to the logical side. Sometimes it's the emotional side. Sometimes it's a mix.
yeah,
But it's important to like not resort to ad hominem, which is one of the worst places to go when you, because as soon as, I mean, yeah, people one side may try that, but you can't fight fire with fire in that regard, because, well, then now you're just going to have a huge fire. Um, like it never ends well when name calling happens, because then you kind of lose sight of the what you're actually talking about, and then it becomes just a you versus that person rather than my thoughts versus your thoughts kind of thing.
yeah. I did a minute microscopy a while back on ad hominem because I feel like there's not that I'm advocating for name calling necessarily. It's just that I feel ad hominem as a logical fallacy has a very specific meaning in
Mm-hmm.
that it's name calling in an attempt to deflate the argument or
Mm-hmm.
like be contrarian to the argument, like,
Yeah.
oh, like you're a complete idiot, so what you think is wrong.
Yes.
It has to be that kind of conclusion that you're drawing from the name calling. But if the person is like clearly an idiot and like,
Well,
like
yeah,
not
yeah.
just because of that, like
Well,
that.
the thing is, like, yeah, you're right. In logic, that is basically what ad hominem is.
Mhm. Mhm.
But also, even then, it doesn't necessarily improve the discussion to
No.
name call in any way, or say something that might be like offensive to another person. Like, you, even calling somebody a flirt or something who's a flat earther, like that's a term that people use, and it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
maybe just avoid that stuff and engage with somebody as an actual human being who maybe has ideas that are probably wrong. Like, the thing is, this is a lesson that I learned a long time ago, um that's been extremely helpful in dealing with life, actually, is that people think the things they do because of the experiences they've had. Like,
Yeah.
they, you may know these things, like let's take flat earth for instance, right? Like, I grew up with a lot of science in my life and was super fascinated with space and studied everything and had all the models and stuff, like, but maybe they didn't. That other person, they're ignorant of those kinds of details, and so when they see this video out there on YouTube or something like that, that's bringing up this conspiratorial thing that links with some other thing that maybe they were suspecting all along, they go down that rabbit hole and
Yeah.
don't have the tools to be able to figure out what separate fact from fiction. So it's like, it's not that they're an idiot, because we're all idiots. Like, not you may know a select few things very well, but you don't know all the things very well. So like a flat earther might be the best mechanic on the face of the planet, but they just don't believe the planet is a spheroid. Like, well, because they focused on
several times. I've given the example of my physics teacher who was totally brilliant. Mm-hmm. It was able to explain physics without calculus. Like that's a huge hurdle to jump over. And he thought the Earth was 6,000 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but it's not that people are necessarily intentionally ignorant of the facts. It's that they just weren't exposed to the facts in the way that another person like you or I were. And I guess that's just the luck of the draw then at that point. But like, you have to be understanding of that and come at it from a merciful angle that like, okay, this person, just like me, is ignorant about some stuff, and you could hope to correct it.
Yeah. I mean, like my dad, kitchen sink, rest his soul, was one of those people that you couldn't really argue with so well, because he was very, very set in his opinions, and I tried so many ways. And I mean, like, if you don't know your dad well enough to make a convincing argument, who is going to, like,
that's true.
Like
family,
like a father and son ought to be able to know how to speak to each other in a convincing way. But like, I couldn't convince him that climate change was a real thing, like stuff like that. Like, it was,
that's
ingrained.
And that's you having intimate knowledge, because I mean, he was a stay-at-home dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were like interacting all the time, so you knew him really, really well. And even then, and that's the thing. Sometimes you just have to accept.
He's also like integral part of shaping my mind for what it is now.
Yeah.
At the same time, so like, take that for what you will. I mean,
Oh yeah. Well, and I think it's important to recognize that sometimes you can't necessarily win a particular battle. That it might not, you alone are not capable of producing the result you would like.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just how it is. Like, your dad passed away thinking the way he did, and like, there you go. And so like, sometimes it's not worth the candle to engage too much.
Yeah. I mean, in recent years, I just shut up and let him talk, because like, I mean,
well,
no sense in like creating an aggravating situation.
Exactly. Well, because there's probably enough common ground apart from that you can hang out and engage without that being the focal point.
Yeah.
But and then so what you could do instead is like, okay, well, I'm not powerful enough essentially to take on that wizard. So I'll focus on the like the minds that can be changed, and work on the stuff that you can do, because you don't have all the time in the world, obviously. So make a difference in whatever way you can. Like, like, there are flat earthers who have changed their minds because of the like anti-flat earthers, I guess, or whatever you want to call them, the people that do response videos and things and engage with the flat earth community. Like, there are a lot of people who've changed their minds because, hey, yeah, you're right, that's a hell of a convincing argument, and boom, bam, you've changed some minds. Like, and then the thing is, those people might be the ones who actually have the power to go up against like the more powerful or the more obstinate, I guess we can say.
I wonder what's better, honestly. Like, is it better to go for the head of the Hydra, or is it better to like change more of the minds of the people the Hydra is
Uh,
aiming.
well, I would go for the body first, because you cut one head off and two emerge.
Yeah.
So it's better to Daryl Davis your way through things, essentially, just like a few people here and there, that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
eventually the body is so weak because it doesn't have enough sustenance to support the heads, and they die. That
Yeah.
or they just kind of wander off in their small little world or something like that. It is interesting too, and I it's just popped into my head because it's like I have this sort of drive or compulsion or something, and I wonder why people do to change people's minds. Like, because I mean, if you think about it, there's people out there all over that don't know stuff. Like everybody doesn't know stuff about something, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but why do we try to do that?
That is like a very human thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that exists in all of us. And I feel that it comes from the little dopamine rush that you get when you learn.
Yeah.
When you learn how to do something, when you feel empowered. If you were doing it wrong before and then learn how to do it correctly, I
Mm-hmm.
feel that's amplified because you thought you had it right and now you actually do, and you can see a more marked difference between
Yeah.
being completely ignorant and being like wrong and then finding out what's right.
Yeah, for
So
me, it's like achieving enlightenment. It's
yeah.
it's such a good feeling because it's like suddenly everything that didn't make sense in a particular area now does. You're like, oh wow, it all makes sense now. And there could possibly be like a feedback sort of effect where if you help somebody else do that, then you secondarily, um, by proxy, I guess, feel it as well. So now, even though you can't feel the excitement of discovery, but you can kind of like glean a little bit of that excitement off of somebody else achieving enlightenment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And it is a dopamine rush thing. Like,
mhm.
being able to, I mean, it's exactly like if you're playing Legend of Zelda and you find a secret glitch or something and you want to tell your buddy about it because it really helped you like win the game or something.
Mm.
Like, wh- well, of course you do that. You
Mhm.
you share your knowledge
Yeah.
because it might help someone you care about.
Well, actually, now I think I figured out why we do this. And it goes back to hundreds of thousands of years ago when, like, our genetic, I think it's a genetic thing, because it's a survival trait to share information that is beneficial to people. And maybe nowadays it's not a matter of like telling people what berries to eat or not eat, or something like, oh yeah, eat that mushroom and you're dead. um, but this one's okay and
That
tastes
is
really
pretty
good.
important still,
Well, it
actually.
is, it is, but like, I think there's a connection there with these other things that aren't really consequential. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if somebody what shape somebody thinks the earth is. It doesn't change anything. Like, they're, I mean, I guess unless they're building a rocket and trying to figure out how to get to another planet or something, well then it does matter.
Oh, that's a
But
good point.
I
I
mean,
always wondered, like, what is the point of arguing with these people because it doesn't really hurt them? But I mean, there was that guy that tried to build his own rocket and
yeah.
died.
Well, and it
Um,
wasn't because he miscalculated because of the shape of the Earth. It was because the rocket just wasn't, like, there were faults with it.
he wasn't a rocket scientist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which, of course, you would, if you were, you would know. But yeah,
Yeah. Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Some things come with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. Like, wow. This. this is touching on some like really important key factors in just living life, I think, because I it's not always about like arguments or being right and wrong. A lot of it is survival.
Yeah, survival.
Like and I think that does kind of like you're spot on with the evolution thing. Like the, this could only be explained by genetics.
Yeah,
It's something that deeply ingrained, something that important to each and every person. That feeling of being right and needing to share it with others.
Like, yeah.
A virality, if you will.
It's a deep compulsion too. Like when there's something very like low level, I guess, like if to use a computer term, like it's a core fundamental function of our minds.
Low key, to use a Gen Z
term. Those are a little bit different, but yeah, similar. I guess they're in the same vibe.
Trying to be relevant.
Old man. Oh man. Yeah,
like that's no, those are some great points. I can't believe I didn't think of the evolution thing, being the biologist. And that's a great point. That's a great point. Like you might be more of an expert than somebody and still completely miss something.
Yeah. Well, what Red Dwarf, that one episode, The Power of Ignorance, right? Like not knowing stuff actually is like a superpower in some cases.
Yeah. No, yeah. Like there's a lot to be said about that, even because I think it is super easy to overlook things when you have a little bit too much confidence. And there's even like, what's the saying? Like a little knowledge. Do you know where I'm going with this? It's like a little knowledge is dangerous or something. Like,
oh yeah, I can't remember that. I know what you're talking about. I know.
Yeah, it's like well, okay. So for an example of what I'm talking about, if you've ever known somebody that took a psychology 100 class, they think they can diagnose everybody with some kind of mental disease.
Yeah. Oh, that's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, essentially.
Yeah. Basically, like a little bit of knowledge about something gives people so much confidence that they really haven't earned yet.
Well, because they're not aware of the rest of the knowledge that's needed. I think that's
right. Yeah. Like not knowing what you don't know is so much more important.
Yeah.
Than knowing things.
Really. Oh, wait, knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
I think you said not knowing.
Not knowing what you don't. Yeah. Well, knowing what you not know. Wait, knowing what you don't know what you not know. What?
Who's eating this chicken? Yeah, it's really important to. But
I've had enough beer.
But without that experience and knowledge, you tend to think all there is to know because your window is so narrow. Like I highly doubt most flat earthers have become rocket scientists or astrophysicists, like gone through all the courses and things like that. I highly doubt that. I don't know a single astronaut from any country who believes the earth is flat.
Right.
That
would be funny.
Flat earth astronaut, like
that sounds like a sitcom.
I know, dude. Or a sketch, like a short sketch.
Right.
Where they're like, this window, this is just like a display. They're CGing this stuff. I don't believe it. As they're like floating around. Well, there's got to be wires somewhere here, that's a green screen, isn't it? Oh man.
Oh god.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
I thought I had a thought. I think I lost it.
Yeah. This always happens.
Yeah. Well, you get enough beer in you.
Yeah. We'll remember it later.
The arguments begin to drown. Yeah.
Sometimes that little bit of mental lubrication can help an argument, though.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's what I really like have a passion for this show about is the fact that like as stupid as our name is because nobody can pronounce it or remember it, it really encapsulates what the core elements are, right? Like kitchen sink, there's everything. And the microscopy angle is that we look at everything in great detail and hypothesize over and over again about this and that. And those are the kinds of mental exercises that really help you uh, buttress the knowledge that you have, find the cracks and the flaws and foundation of the knowledge you think you had, and gain the passion to seek the knowledge that you haven't got. You know,
that's it too, because like while they're like when saying like microscopy, sure, we analyze the details, but there's also an aspect of seeing the man behind the curtain, discovering, looking deeper too. Because like at one point in time before the development of the microscope, there were all kinds of weird theories about where diseases came from or what we're made of and stuff. And as soon as we could look deep down and see what it really was, that enlightened us greatly. And everything changed after that. And I think that's something that we strive for on this show.
Yeah. And yeah, really the show is predicated a lot on things like truth, finding the truth, defining truth.
Yeah.
Because like truth is subjective, but has like an objective element to it.
Well,
it's this weird paradox, like.
Well, because I don't think truth is a destination; it's a direction.
Yeah,
that's the key thing to consider that's about what truth is.
Yeah,
and like we have things like laws of physics or something, right, or that kind of thing. But even those could be proven wrong with certain discoveries. People say, oh, it violates the laws of physics. Well, they're not laws. They're just things we've observed consistently to be true. But there is a possibility of there being something that doesn't follow those rules. And, have to be open to that.
Well, okay, so laws, as we talked about in a previous episode, such as like Good Samaritan laws, those change from country to country, state to state, city to city. A law might be the law of your land, but over there, some other dimension or universe, things might work a little differently.
Yeah.
And there might be an entirely plausible, explainable, testable, provable reason for that, which would be a law of physics in that realm,
Well, so going into like the creation of the microscope led to a complete explosion of further understanding that opened a door that was previously closed. Like now we see what's in that other room, what things are made of, at least to a point. And now we're getting further and further down to like atomic, subatomic levels and stuff like that. And
subatomic wasteland
is my home. So, but there could be things like that other dimensions, like you were saying, or whatever. Like there could be more to existence than we know. We just haven't yet figured out how to observe it. Um, there, like when you get into quantum physics, it starts looking very much like that is the case. It's just like it's so beyond our capacity. But it'd be like, if you took cavemen essentially and expected them to build a microscope. Like, okay, there are so many in between steps that are necessary to get to the point where you can make one of those. Like, of course, they're not going to be able to observe the microscopic world. And even then, when we had the microscope, we could see some things, but like the electron microscope showed us even more.
Yeah.
And like we now know way more, but like, yeah. So
that's a great example of knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
Like a caveman wouldn't even think that something that microscopic exists, so they wouldn't be looking for it in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it definitely takes an evolution. It definitely takes a lot of arguments to uncover and unravel a lot of the gaps, let's say, in knowledge. Because, like, is anyone ever really right? I mean, for the moment, maybe,
Yeah. Given what we know, I guess we can compare what we know to what we can, what we believe we know to what we can observe and things like that. But there's more to the story. There always is. I think there always will be. And honestly, if you have been following like the James Webb telescope and some of the stuff, like the universe is so huge.
James Webb.
James Webb. The universe is so huge. It's like mind boggling, as some people say. It like you just can't even fathom it. It's almost impossible. And it like, wow, how small it feels knowing that. But then again, like, okay, well, when you step out the door, there's a pretty big Earth. Like locally, when we're here, it's big. Even like a city is big. Even though when we zoom out to like the galactic or intergalactic level, we don't mean shit. Like we have no significance whatsoever. But that doesn't, I mean, I guess that could be some kind of thing like, hey, maybe let's make it count. Let's make our existence mean something. That's the, I guess, a good lesson from that. But at the same time, it's like, well, you shouldn't say like, well, nothing matters because we're so tiny. No, I mean, walk outside and there are people going about their daily business and things are happening and those things locally are significant.
Yeah. I mean, the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, could also be said like you can't see the cells for the trees.
Yeah.
Because either
the cells for the knees or something like that.
Yeah. Either way you look at it, there's either too much detail or not enough detail. Like it, yeah. There's a lot of different perspectives to focus your argument on, right? And the questions that you ask really need to be the right category, I guess. Like if you're looking into the finer details, the questions have to be more pointed. And when you're trying to look at the bigger picture, then it gets more general.
Yeah.
But the problem with getting more general is that you have to be a little more loose with the answers that you accept. And that's where you start getting more potential for argument, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
When you look at the fine details, it's kind of this or that, right? But when you have to start generalizing things, like a lot of like chemistry, A lot of what you learn in early chemistry, you get to a certain point where they're like, hey, everything we taught you, go ahead and forget that because we completely lied to you.
Yep.
So that you would understand it. But now you know all these other things.
Well,
and you can understand how it really works.
Physics and mathematics is exactly the same too, or electronics too. Like you start off and they're saying like, oh, it works like water pipes, and that's how a bigger pipe is more current, and it's, you know, faster moving is more voltage, and then, well, that actually isn't exactly how it works, but that's a good way to kind of like get you to comprehend fundamentally how a thing works. And then you can get down into the nitty gritty and start to understand more. And I suppose that's a, oh man, this is, I think we've
getting in this weird existential dread.
Oh man. Every time I look out at the stars at night, I get that feeling.
Oh man, like I'm digging Germany because like the stars are just clearer here.
They probably have like light pollution, better light pollution control.
Pollution in general, I think, is just less, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like our view of the world is decidedly myopic. Like it really does a great service to yourself to move yourself outside of these comfort zones and these boxes.
I agree. No, that's a really good point, that like we should explore. I mean, you don't necessarily have to physically go to a place, but you can explore it virtually, or don't take my word for it. You could do it through a book.
Take a look.
Oh god, best theme song and intro ever. That was, man. But yeah, I think it's important to verse ourselves on as much information as possible. And well, I mean, if you want to have a good argument, you need that. Or be able to counter argue somebody, you definitely need that too. Try to be an expert in all things.
Still an open invitation to LeVar Burton. Come on the show.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll be knocking down our door.
Right. Yeah. Someday.
Yeah, someday. Oh man.
I mean, yeah, like lofty goals are, you know, they're worth having. You know, because you know nothing's impossible. You know, that's the thing. Like an argument, it's never impossible that you're right or wrong. You know, like
it's all probabilistic.
Yeah. Like no one should have 100% confidence, but they should also not like be too critical of everything that they take in, right? Like this whole idea that you can't believe what's on TV, can't Facebook's not a real world, things like that. I'm always like, hang on, these are real people, these are based on real situations. Like there is always an element of truth in everything.
Yeah,
and there's always an element of lie.
This is true.
Like it's none of that changes.
There's
like,
varying proportions of both in everything. Never 100% and never 0%. Well, and that's where like one of our friends, I think season 1, we did a video about atheism, and he criticized you for, he's like, well, he's not a real atheist because he doesn't say that there is no God. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's not what being an atheist is. Like, if you're saying there is no God, it's basically the same as saying there definitely is. Like,
yeah,
you can't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, essentially, the atheistic viewpoint is, well, I've read all of your arguments, your proposals, and your information, and I remain unconvinced. That doesn't saying like, no, because all these statements that people have made don't convince me that therefore there is no God. Well, that's a very ignorant stance to take.
Yeah, I think the way I phrased it was more or less like, I conduct my life as if there is no God. Which, I mean, depending on how you want to take that, could be either an atheist statement or an agnostic statement. But to me, it leans more to the atheist side, because an agnostic would, in my opinion, phrase it more like, I don't know, like actually just taking the stance of like, it could be this, it could be that. Like, sometimes I feel this way, sometimes I feel that way. I more often than not feel like there is no God, and I just conduct my life that way. But I mean, I still think like, hey, if my parents are right, the Catholic way is right, and they're in heaven and they're happy together, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And they're watching over me and they're saying, you know what, like, he's an atheist, but he's a good guy. So we'll probably see him someday. Like things like that run through my head. It doesn't mean I operate my life as if like some kind of God is watching my every move and taking little notes like,
you're on the naughty list
times today. not that I've done that recently.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, yeah, and that's, I consider myself like an atheist agnostic. Like I believe in like the force. Like there is definitely some kind of something, but it's not what any of those people's doctrines say it is. That's my point. And I suppose that is basically atheism. Like, I'm non-theistic.
Well, in my book, which I'm not like plugging totally right now, I describe myself as a spiritual atheist, because I believe in a spirit of sorts. Like how I define the spirit may differ from somebody who's heavily religious, let's say in the Christian or Catholic sense, but I still feel like there is untapped potential, or maybe not untapped, but like potential that we aren't tuned into at all times.
There's more to draw upon. There's more behind the scenes than we're aware of.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm still convinced that that is the case. Just can't really explain it, like, and I mean, that doesn't make me less of an atheist, because there's tons of shit we observe and still can't explain.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean we believe in magic.
Exactly.
It means we just don't know.
And we know exactly that we don't know. There is a lot that we don't know still. We know a lot, but maybe it could turn out that we barely know anything.
Yeah.
The Dunning-Kruger
when you put a name on it. It's when you say magic or God.
Yeah.
That's when you're falling into one of these buckets where you're just like, I'm done looking for the answer. I'm going to call it this.
I'll stop and set up camp right here. This is my destination. And that's what the whole thing about truth.
Yeah. I mean, like being an atheist means that you're never really satisfied with your amount of knowledge. That's kind of all it is. Like if you have that mindset, I'm pretty confident that you will land in the atheist camp somewhere in some varying degree, whether it's on the edge of the fire or near the fire. Like, you're probably going to be like, you know what, like, there's not enough evidence. I'm sorry.
Well, and this actually ties in nicely. Like, we've kind of circled right back to argument, because that's another area, the atheist versus religion X kind of people arguments and stuff. It, God, that's a big one. And yeah, you see a lot of issues with the discussions that take place, and it's really unfortunate because, like, I mean, if you're so confident that you're correct, well, then your argument, your whatever you're saying, should withstand any amount of criticism.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those topics that, as humans stand, there cannot be a definitive answer in either direction.
Well, no, because like all it is speculation through and through.
Doesn't mean someday there won't be an actual answer, but right now, like, nobody can say for sure. So
that's the thing. Yeah, all sides of that particular thing, like flat Earth kind of stuff. At least there's like measurable things that you can observe. But when you're talking about a god, like, okay, unless somebody creates like a god meter or something like that, right? Like, there's no way to know. And so at that point, it's speculative versus speculative.
History Channel has got like these ghost shows, but they're like God. It's not like, what was that?
Oh, it's Yahweh.
It's the Holy Ghost.
The Holy Ghost. But that's the thing. It's like, because there is no way to test at all. I mean, sure, you can test like claims that people have made, certain claims, not like a claim like there is a God. That's impossible to test or, prove or disprove. But like a claim that that a thing was done by God, you could
miracle cure, for instance.
Yeah. You could potentially test for that. But like, yeah. Oh, that kind of discussion, arguments with involving religion are some of the most difficult.
Yeah. Well, we can definitely link to some of those episodes, but I think we've probably argued the art of argument quite enough.
Yes, we've come full circle, I think. So
my bladder is about to argue with me.
All right. Well, yeah, I think
it's kind of winning the argument.
It is. Well, hopefully it doesn't win before we close out. All right. Well, okay, everybody, enjoy the song. That's probably queuing up at some point.
And it's probably not about pee.